So this is the second attempted assassination of Donald Trump, the former U.S. president. We'll start with that, and let's talk to someone who knows a thing or two about U.S. national security. He's been former national security advisor in the Trump administration, also former American ambassador to the United Nations. John Bolton is now joining us. Thank you very much, Ambassador Bolton, for speaking with us. So I'm sure you must have followed the news just as closely as all of us have about this second attempted assassination on Donald Trump, this one at his own golf course in Florida. What do you make of it?
Well, it certainly sounds in some respects like it's a copycat attack based on this individual having watched what happened in Pennsylvania. And I think it's, for that reason, an indication about why we need to lower the rhetoric and lower the references to violence and the temptation that somebody will try and make another attempt. You know, it's also part of a pattern of difficulty. If someone's willing to risk getting close enough to be captured or even killed himself to assassinate somebody, it's very, very hard to prevent it from happening. I think the Secret Service deserves great credit here, but it's obviously a warning of potential things to come.
What does it say about the Secret Service and its ability being drawn into question, first in Pennsylvania, now in Florida, about protecting someone as high profile as Donald Trump?
Well, I think in this case at the golf course yesterday, they succeeded. This individual was 500 yards away from Trump. That's 5 American football fields. You can't put bubble wrap around him 500 yards in all directions and expect him to carry on a campaign. Could the Secret Service use more resources? Sure. I mean, I speak as someone currently under Secret Service protection against the Iranians who have tried to assassinate not just President Trump, but a number of others of us as well. They've got resource limitations like every other human endeavor. So I think what you're seeing in Congress, the quick reaction is the Secret Service needs more resources and they should get it, and that Trump's personal protection should be beefed up to the level of an incumbent president. And I think in light of what's happened, that certainly makes sense.
There is one view which seems to suggest that the level of political rhetoric and almost rhetoric to violence has been heightened so much that, someone should have foreseen this coming. Do you agree with that view?
Well, as I say, to the extent this is a copycat, in other words, somebody who's kind of lit off by seeing somebody else try and do it in a country of 320 million people, that's pretty hard to suppress. But I do think we could all lower the level of political rhetoric, including Donald Trump, who last night tweeted out, I quote, "I hate Taylor Swift." Now, I don't listen to Taylor Swift's music, but that's not my judgment as a music critic. He needs to stop it. Other people need to stop it. And let's get back to talking about very difficult issues that face the United States.
I do want to ask you, the last time there was the attempted assassination in July, it was followed by the Republican convention. Trump, of course, got a big bump up in the polls at that time. Do you see a fallout similar to that or very different from that this time around, and why?
Yeah, it's a fair question, but it's very hard to answer. I mean, perhaps we'll learn more about this individual's motivations. At least according to early reporting, he contributed to Democratic candidates. But it's a mistake, I think, for those of us who are engaged in public policy to assume that because somebody like this attempted murderer, because he says things about politics, that those are the things that motivate him. I mean, I think this fella, like the guy in Pennsylvania, has mental issues, and I think that's probably the bigger motivating factor rather than who he contributes to.
You don't see this moving the polls in any meaningful way, do you?
I don't at this point. The country is very divided. All the polls are within the margin of error. Again, it depends on learning more about this individual and how people react. Trump himself seems to have taken it rather coolly. He thanked the Secret Service for their work and joked that he had wanted to continue playing golf. So I think maybe the first time was a bit of an experience for Trump. Maybe this will be it as well. Maybe it'll help to contribute in toning down his rhetoric.
What do you make of the state of the race as it stands today? We're less than 2 months out into November. Particularly after last week's debate performance. I'm sure you watched the debate where the almost consensus view seemed to be that Kamala Harris had a better night than Trump. Where does the race stand as of now, in your view?
Well, I think it's dead even. Almost every poll you look at whether registered voters or likely voters, whether nationwide or state by state, in the battleground states, is within the margin of error. And I think what that means is that while Kamala Harris has certainly recovered from the depths that the Biden campaign had fallen to, she's back up to the level of a generic Democrat, and she has not made the sale completely. So, as you say, there are right now 50 days to go until Election Day, and I think it's anybody's guess at this point.
Do you see, they say, momentum is a big thing. Of course, Kamala Harris had huge momentum when Biden dropped out, and within a few days, she was able to wrap up support of the Democratic leadership and the rank and file. But that momentum seemed to sort of taper off a bit going into the debate. And then, of course, the debate performance happened. And everyone seems to say that it's her campaign that has wind behind its tail. Do you see anything changing substantially between now and November for that situation to change?
Well, I think the momentum comes and goes, and certainly the bounce people expect after a convention, the bounce after a successful debate, is probably happening, and sometimes it's below the surface of it. Increases the determination of weak Harris supporters to vote for, shakes up the Trump supporters a little bit who see such a poor debate performance, and that translates into poll numbers down the road as people think about this. They're not. It's not like a slot machine where something happens and suddenly everything turns around. I think people do tend to consider this to be a serious vote, so they're not going to react immediately. But it also means you could go very late in the campaign and still have a large number of undecided or weak supporters on both sides, and they could all shift in the very last days of the campaign.
I do want to ask you, and if you can explain to our viewers who are watching in India and around the world, just in terms of foreign policy, the two big wars that are on right now, which are ravaging the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas war, how do you see that playing out under a Harris presidency as opposed to a Trump presidency?
Well, on Harris, we still know very little about her foreign policy. She didn't have much experience as a senator in foreign policy. She's been for 3.5 years attending National Security Council meetings in the Biden administration. My guess is for the first year, at least, of a Harris administration, her foreign policy would look a lot like Biden's, that she's on a trajectory and would continue until external events intervene or until her advisors begin to have more of an influence. I think she'll have a new team. I don't think she'll keep on, at least at the very top levels, very many of the Biden people. But it's still difficult to predict her beyond that first 9 months, 12 months. But I do think it would look a lot like Biden. Trump being Trump, you really can't predict what he'll do on any given day. But he's taken a very negative tone toward Ukraine, tilting very much toward Russia in that war. His vice president just suggested a peace plan in Ukraine that looks a lot like Vladimir Putin's wish list for that war. So I think that's a pretty good indication. And I think in the Middle East, Trump has said he wants the conflict in Gaza ended, not because he has an idea how to do that, but because he doesn't like the negative publicity. So that's Trump for you. He doesn't come with a philosophy. He doesn't come with policies. He comes with impulses and really anecdotal, ad hoc, transactional treatment of one issue after another.
And between these two, Harris vis-a-vis Trump, which of these two you reckon would be better for India and India-US ties?
Look, I think it's a coin toss between them. I'm not going to vote for either one. I'd hate to recommend to India which one would be better able to make progress in our relationship. But I do think between India and the United States, there are many, many common issues here, many common threats that we face, some difficult issues as well. But relations between India and the United States are going to be critical in the next several decades. And frankly, from the U.S. point of view, we just need to devote more time and attention to it.
All right. John Bolton, thank you very much for joining us, the former National Security Advisor and U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, with his thoughts on this evolving and shaping race in the United States in the American presidential election between Trump and Harris, of course, coming on the back of this second assassination attempt on Trump's life, although no one's quite sure what kind of a political fallout and electoral fallout that might have.